She smiles at you, radiant, magnetic, and filled with the charm that men instinctively chase. You feel her presence as intoxicating. The softness of her voice, the way she carries herself, the way she looks into your eyes. It all feels like you've discovered someone rare. She knows how to hold your attention, how to make you believe that what you have found is precious and untouched. Yet beneath that illusion lies a brutal truth, one that few men dare to confront. What you believe to be mystery often conceals repetition. Every glance, every touch, every carefully timed moment feels unique to you, but to her, it has already been rehearsed. This is not intimacy, it is choreography. Julius Evola warned us that when the sacred dimension of love collapses, intimacy becomes consumption. Bodies turn into commodities, and experiences turn into repetitions of the same worn-out script. Men step into this script unaware, believing they are special, when in reality, they are walking down a well-worn path others have already traveled. A woman who has lived through countless experiences with men does not enter your life as untouched ground. She carries residue, she carries fragments, she carries the impressions of every man who came before you. And no matter how much she conceals it with performance, those imprints remain. Evola's vision was clear. When Eros loses its higher calling, it ceases to be a symbol of transcendence and becomes nothing but a transaction. When you meet her body, you are not encountering purity, you are entering a marketplace. This is why so many men feel confused. They believe they have found someone confident, someone experienced, someone who knows what she wants. But what they mistake for confidence is erosion. It is not mastery born of strength. It is exhaustion born of repetition. Her ease with intimacy, her fluency in touch, her skill with words. These are not signs of depth but symptoms of overexposure. The sacred flame has been traded for a match that burns out quickly, leaving only smoke. Look into her stories, the way she speaks about men from her past. You will notice a trail of endings, disappointments, and unfinished beginnings. Each new relationship started with intensity but collapsed into nothing. Evola observed this pattern as the mark of decadence, novelty without direction, desire without permanence. Her past is not a series of meaningful unions. It is a cycle of dispersal, and that dispersal robs her of the very essence that makes a woman capable of anchoring love into something higher. Even her gaze tells the story. The eyes of a woman who has not been scattered hold mystery. They carry depth, they reflect an untouched inner world. But the eyes of a woman consumed by repetition dart restlessly. They struggle to settle on one man for too long. Evola described this as the loss of form, where the feminine principle dissolves into dispersion. Instead of anchoring herself in one sacred bond, she scatters herself across countless encounters. Modern society praises this as freedom. They call her independent, liberated, empowered. But Evola strips away the illusion. Freedom without transcendence is slavery to instinct. She is not free. She is chained to the endless cycle of desire and validation. Her body count is not a badge of liberation. It is a chain of fragmentation. Each encounter chips away at her ability to bond, her ability to revere, her ability to stand before one man with full presence. What happens when you step into this cycle? You inherit not purity but residue. You inherit her comparisons, her memories, her rehearsed reactions. You are not meeting her as she is. You are meeting her as the sum of every man who came before you. Evola warned that when the sacred collapses, what was once a temple becomes a marketplace, and once a temple becomes a marketplace, nothing within it holds value. This is why her body count matters. Each man she has been with diminishes the flame that could have been reserved for one bond. The more she disperses herself, the less she can anchor herself. Intimacy becomes casual, not sacred. Love becomes performance, not depth. And when you enter her life, you are not entering sacred ground. You are walking into the ruins of something once divine. Men deceive themselves by believing they can restore that flame. They convince themselves that their love will be different, that their connection will rise above her past. But this is not restoration, it is delusion. Evola reminds us that once sacredness collapses, it rarely rebuilds. The ruins remain ruins, and when you tie yourself to a woman shaped by countless encounters, you are not building a temple. You are living inside rubble. The brutal truth is simple. Her past is not behind her. Her past lies within her. Every encounter, every repetition, every fragment is carried into the present. And when you embrace her, you embrace all of it. You cannot separate her from what she has lived through. You cannot separate her from the cycle she has chosen. And no matter how much society insists that her past does not matter, reality proves otherwise. Evola did not write to flatter, he wrote to reveal. And the revelation is this: her body counts will destroy you, not in a dramatic explosion, but in quiet corrosion. The sacredness you crave will dissolve, the bond you hoped for will fragment, and what you thought was rare will reveal itself as ordinary, exhausted, and worn thin. This is the first brutal truth. What appears radiant is often ruins. What feels unique is often repetition. And what you believe to be love may be nothing but the shadow of countless encounters already lived. A man who ties himself to a woman with high body counts does not realize what he is inheriting. He imagines intimacy as a clean slate, believing he will be the one who unlocks her deepest loyalty. But the truth is brutal. The more men she has known, the less she can bond. The feminine soul is not designed to scatter endlessly and remain whole. Each new encounter fragments her, leaving behind residues that cannot be erased. Evola recognized this as the collapse of form, where the sacred essence of femininity disperses into fragments without ever finding center again. This dispersal weakens her ability to imprint fully on one man, biologically, emotionally, and spiritually. The feminine principle bonds through exclusivity. When that exclusivity is lost, her capacity for devotion diminishes. What you inherit is not a pure bond, but the shadow of many bonds layered over one another. You will always be compared, measured against those who came before. Her love becomes divided, her loyalty becomes conditional, and her spirit remains restless, unable to anchor itself fully in you. This is why so many men today feel haunted by insecurity when they commit to women with long pasts. They sense the comparisons, though she may never speak them. They feel her divided attention, though she may never admit it. And no matter how much they give, they cannot shake the silent ghosts of the men who came before them. Evola described this as the desacralization of eros, the loss of its divine weight, reducing intimacy to repetition. What once could have been temple fire now flickers as a dying candle. Consider how quickly such women escalate intimacy. What should have required reverence, patience, and symbolic weight becomes casual, stripped of depth. She crosses thresholds without hesitation, because those thresholds were crossed countless times before. And with each crossing, the power of the act diminished. What should have been a sacred union now becomes routine. She gives without trembling, not because she is liberated, but because she is exhausted. This exhaustion is not just physical, it is spiritual. Evola taught that the higher function of eros is transcendence. It was meant to unite body and spirit, man and woman, into something divine. But once eros is emptied of this higher function, it collapses into mechanical repetition. The act remains, but the essence evaporates. And when essence evaporates, what remains is hollow. Men who mistake that hollowness for confidence set themselves on the path to ruin. A woman with many pasts will often speak of freedom. She will call herself independent, untethered, and self-defined, yet what looks like strength is often slavery. She is not free from men, she is enslaved to their validation. Each new encounter becomes fuel for her sense of self, because she has lost the ability to anchor her worth in the sacred. She seeks endless attention, endless affirmation, because without it, she feels empty. This emptiness drives her forward, never allowing her to stay rooted in one bond. For the man who enters her life, this reality is devastating. He believes he has won her, that her devotion belongs solely to him. But soon, he sees the cracks. He sees how quickly her attention wavers. He sees how restless her spirit becomes when validation slows. He sees how the ghosts of her past continue to live within her. And slowly, he realizes that her bond is not full, not permanent, not sacred. It is fragmented, conditional, and shallow. Evola would call this the desacralization of womanhood itself, the fall from higher principle into dispersion. Her approach to conflict further reveals this erosion. Instead of enduring trials as a test of love's permanence, she threatens withdrawal. She knows departure is always an option, because she has departed before. She knows love can be abandoned without reverence, because she has abandoned it countless times. And so the courage to endure is gone. Evola taught that only endurance can reveal the higher truth of love. Without it, every bond collapses into another broken fragment. The man caught in this cycle suffers quietly. He feels the weight of comparison. He feels the instability of her presence. He feels the absence of the sacred. And though he may not articulate it in Evola's terms, he knows something is missing. What should have been depth feels shallow. What should have been rare feels common. What should have been fire feels cold. This is the erosion of bonding, the inevitable result of her past. The world will tell you that her history does not matter. They will say her past is gone, that you should only care about the present. But reality defies this illusion. Her past is not erased. It is etched into her soul, carried into every new encounter. You inherit the sum of her dispersal, not a blank page, and no amount of denial can change this truth. Evola's warning stands as iron law. Intimacy divorced from transcendence dissolves into nothing but repetition, and repetition kills devotion. When a woman scatters herself across countless encounters, she loses the ability to bind herself to one man fully. Her body counts are not numbers, they are fractures, and each fracture weakens the foundation of her future bonds. For the man, this destruction is slow but certain. At first he feels intoxicated, deceived by her performance, but soon he faces insecurity, comparison, and instability. He finds himself giving more and receiving less. He begins to feel as though he is not enough, when the truth is that no man could be enough for someone who has already scattered herself across countless others. This is why body counts destroy men, not because of jealousy, not because of insecurity, but because sacred union becomes impossible. You cannot build permanence on ruins, you cannot find wholeness in fragments, and you cannot bind yourself to someone who has already lost the capacity to anchor themselves. This is the brutal truth of the second stage. Her past is not gone, it is alive within her, and it will haunt you. Evola warned that when love is stripped of transcendence, it collapses into mere exchange. What was once sacred union becomes transaction. What was once temple becomes market. A woman with high body counts embodies this collapse. She has turned what should be reverence into repetition, what should be loyalty into dispersion. She is no longer the guardian of intimacy but a participant in endless trade. And every man who enters her life must confront this brutal reality. Her approach to intimacy is mechanical, because she has rehearsed it countless times before. The way she touches, the way she laughs, the way she pretends to connect. None of it is spontaneous. It is performance refined by experience. She gives you what you expect, because she has already given it to many before you. Evola saw this as the descent of Eros into spectacle, where love no longer elevates but entertains. This is why so many men are deceived. They mistake her performance for authenticity. They believe they are experiencing something rare, when in reality, they are just the next in line. Her body has become a stage, her words a script, her affection an act. What feels like intimacy to you is nothing more than theater. And when you realize the truth, it corrodes your spirit. The marketplace of flesh is not just about numbers. It is about the erosion of value. In a market, abundance kills uniqueness. The more plentiful something becomes, the less precious it is. When her body has been given to many, it ceases to carry meaning. It is no longer sacred ground but public property. And when you share something with many, you cannot expect it to remain rare for you. Evola's teachings make this reality undeniable. Once the sacred collapses into the common, the divine vanishes. This is why modern men feel disillusioned. They pursue women praised by society as liberated, only to discover emptiness. They expected fire, but they found smoke. They expected depth, but they found hollowness. The more men she has known, the more shallow her intimacy becomes. She no longer trembles with reverence because reverence has been stripped away by routine. What should have been awe has become habit. What should have been rare has become common. Evola insisted that the feminine principle holds its highest power in its ability to anchor, to sanctify union through exclusivity. When exclusivity is lost, her essence disperses. She no longer binds. She scatters. She no longer sanctifies. She profanes. A woman in this state is not a temple but a ruin, and men who build on ruins inherit collapse. Look at her relationship with time. A woman grounded in sacred intimacy values permanence. She builds carefully. She guards her devotion. But a woman consumed by the marketplace rushes forward without hesitation. She escalates quickly, because she has done it countless times. She replaces one man with another, as though men were interchangeable parts of the same machine. This reveals her truth. She does not seek permanence, only novelty. And novelty always collapses into boredom. This is why her relationships fail. She is not built to endure trials, because endurance demands reverence. She seeks stimulation, not sanctification. And when stimulation fades, she abandons. Every relationship becomes disposable, every man replaceable. The market never closes, and she never stops trading. Evola saw this as the corruption of Eros into consumption, where love becomes a product rather than a sacrament. For the man, this reality is poison. He enters believing he has found devotion, but he soon realizes he has purchased a product. He's not special. He is next. He is not chosen. He is consumed. And once the novelty fades, he will be discarded like those before him. This cycle destroys his confidence, his spirit, his very sense of worth. He becomes one more name on her endless list, one more fragment in her cycle of dispersal. Society tells men not to judge, to ignore her past, to believe that body counts hold no meaning. But Evola shatters this illusion. Numbers are not just numbers, they are evidence of collapse. Each man she has known erodes her capacity for depth. Each encounter strips her of reverence. Each repetition drains her spirit of devotion. What remains is not purity but performance, not sanctity but spectacle. The marketplace of flesh destroys men because it destroys meaning. When you enter her life, you inherit the market. You inherit comparison. You inherit instability. You inherit emptiness. What should have been unique becomes ordinary. What should have been sacred becomes profane. And in that collapse, you lose not only her but yourself. Evola's truth is brutal but clear. Intimacy divorced from transcendence becomes a carnival. Bright lights, empty rides, endless repetition. The man who enters expects to find love but discovers performance. He expects devotion but inherits dispersion. And once he realizes the truth, it is too late. The bond has already corroded. The fire has already died. This is the third brutal truth. Her body counts are not just numbers. They are signs of the marketplace. They reveal that what you thought was sacred has already been sold. And when you take part in that exchange, you do not rise, you fall. The man who binds himself to a woman with many pasts does not simply gain her presence. He inherits her history, and that history lives silently within her, shaping every moment of intimacy, every glance, every expectation. No matter how much she hides it, her memory remains. And memory, Evola warned, can poison union when it is tied to repetition rather than transcendence. Comparison becomes the silent third presence in your relationship. You may not see it, but you feel it. She has known others, and the echoes of those others shape how she sees you. Every word you say, every gesture you make, carries with it an unspoken judgment. You are not being measured against an ideal. You are being measured against her past. And no man can win this battle, because her standard is not purity but accumulation. This is why insecurity creeps into men who choose women with high body counts. It is not weakness. It is reality. You sense that her mind is not wholly yours. You feel that her spirit is not anchored. You notice the comparisons, the subtle shifts in her gaze, the quiet judgments hidden behind her words. Even if she swears she does not compare, her very experience makes comparison inevitable. Evola described this as the scattering of essence, where the feminine principle disperses itself so widely that no single bond can ever claim it fully again. Her ability to bond has been weakened, not by nature, but by overuse. Just as repetition dulls wonder, repetition dulls devotion. What should have been awe is now routine. What should have been reverence is now habit. She treats you as she treated others, not because she intends to, but because her spirit has been conditioned by repetition. Her intimacy no longer belongs to you alone. It belongs to every man who came before you. This truth eats away at the man's confidence. He feels he must compete not only with the present but with the past. He tries to outperform ghosts, forgetting that ghosts cannot be defeated. They live in her memory, and memory carries them forward into your bond. This constant comparison erodes trust. It erodes peace. It erodes the sacred foundation upon which intimacy should stand. Evola's warning resounds. Once love is divorced from transcendence, it becomes an endless cycle of beginnings and endings, each carrying the shadow of those before. Watch her when she speaks about former lovers. Notice how easily the stories leave her tongue. Notice how lightly she treats bonds that should have been sacred. These are not memories treated with reverence. They are anecdotes, stripped of weight, stripped of permanence. Each story reveals how repetition dulled meaning. Evola observed that when the vertical dimension of love collapses, life is lived only horizontally, spread wide but never deep. That horizontal dispersal ensures that every bond remains shallow. The man who loves such a woman pays the price in silence. He feels himself drained by comparisons he cannot fight. He wonders if he is enough, not realizing that no man could ever be enough for someone who has scattered herself too widely. This silent burden becomes his prison. He walks with her hand in his, but he walks with ghosts all around him. Her behavior in conflict only sharpens this weight. A woman with low body counts treats conflict as trial, as a test that must be endured to strengthen union. But a woman who has left many men behind treats conflict as disposable. She does not endure. She threatens departure. She does not build. She replaces. Each disagreement reminds her that leaving is always possible, because she has left before, and in that habit of leaving, permanence dies. Evola saw this as the ultimate corruption of the feminine principle. When endurance vanishes, love becomes a revolving door. The tragedy is not only hers, it becomes yours. You suffer her restlessness. You suffer her comparisons. You suffer her inability to revere. Slowly your own spirit begins to collapse. You lose focus, you lose strength, you lose belief in permanence. This is how her past destroys you, not through loud betrayal, but through quiet corrosion. Each day you spend with her feels slightly less secure, slightly less sacred. Over time, this corrosion eats away at your very foundation as a man. The world tells you to ignore this. They say her past is her own, that you should only care about the present. But this is falsehood. Her past is alive within her. Her past shapes her gaze, her words, her very ability to love. When you join yourself to her, you do not escape her history. You inherit it. And that inheritance is not wealth, it is debt. Evola's brutal clarity strips away every illusion. Love without transcendence collapses into repetition. Repetition collapses into comparison, and comparison collapses into despair. A woman who has lived through many cannot give herself fully to one. Her devotion will always be fractured, her presence always divided, and the man who binds himself to her will always carry the weight of ghosts he cannot see. This is the fourth brutal truth. Comparison destroys love. Her body counts are not just numbers, they are chains of memory, and when you take her hand, you also take her past. You do not walk with her alone, you walk with the shadows of every man who came before. Evola did not only warn about the downfall of men, he warned about the downfall of civilizations, the corruption of intimacy, the erosion of reverence, the loss of sanctity. All these are not private matters, they are signs of civilizational decay. When women scatter themselves, when men accept the scattering, society itself collapses into disorder. What begins in the bedroom spreads to the empire. A woman with high body counts is not just an individual story. She is a symptom of a greater sickness. She reveals how far society has fallen, how little value it places on permanence, how easily it discards the sacred. In past ages, the feminine principle stood as guardian of continuity. Woman embodied permanence, sanctity, and reverence. But when she abandons this role, when she embraces dispersion, the civilization she anchors collapses with her. Evola saw this truth with brutal clarity. Once the sacred feminine is profaned, the masculine loses its anchor, and the empire crumbles. Look at the modern world. Families disintegrate, children grow without fathers, marriages collapse at alarming rates, men withdraw from responsibility, while women drift endlessly from partner to partner. This is not freedom, this is fragmentation. It is the inevitable consequence of profaning what should have remained sacred. A woman who disperses herself cannot build permanence. A man who accepts her dispersal cannot command strength, and together they cannot build a civilization. Evola's philosophy does not treat intimacy as entertainment. He treats it as sacred war. Man and woman unite not for pleasure, but for transcendence. Their bond becomes a ladder toward higher states, a temple of permanence that defies chaos. But when a woman's past has scattered her essence, that temple cannot be built. The ladder collapses. The war is lost before it begins. What remains is not union but ruin. The man who enters her life inherits that ruin. He becomes weaker, more restless, more uncertain. He spends his strength not in conquest but in doubt. He loses clarity. He loses sovereignty. And when enough men lose sovereignty, the civilization itself loses sovereignty. This is how nations fall, not through foreign conquest, but through internal decay. And that decay begins when the sacred feminine becomes profane. You see it in her inability to endure hardship. You see it in her refusal to revere. You see it in her habit of replacing rather than repairing. These qualities, magnified across millions of women, destroy the family structure, and without family, no civilization endures. Evola declared that tradition is preserved through continuity. But a woman with countless pasts cannot preserve continuity. She lives in rupture, she lives in endings, and when endings multiply, civilizations disintegrate. This truth is brutal, but it liberates the man who accepts it. He no longer deceives himself. He no longer believes that her past is irrelevant. He no longer trusts in illusions. He sees her for what she is, not as an enemy, but as evidence of collapse. And with that clarity, he chooses differently. He chooses to anchor himself in permanence, to seek the rare over the common, the sacred over the profane. Evola's wisdom is not despair but discipline. It does not tell men to surrender, but to rise above the ruins. The modern world worships novelty. Evola commands you to worship permanence. The modern world celebrates dispersion. Evola commands you to seek sanctity. The modern world praises liberation. Evola commands you to demand reverence. This path is not easy. It requires rejection of the lies that surround you. It requires turning away from the carnival of flesh, the endless marketplace, the false promises of liberation. It requires standing as a citadel in a world of ruins. A woman's body counts are not just her own private story. They are civilizational markers. They reveal whether a society honors sanctity or worships spectacle. They reveal whether permanence still matters or whether everything has been surrendered to chaos. When you choose a woman, you do not just choose a partner. You choose the future of your bloodline. You choose whether your descendants inherit reverence or inherit ruin, and that choice shapes the destiny of nations. Evola's final warning resounds. A civilization that abandons sanctity collapses. A man who ignores the signs condemns himself. A woman who profanes her essence cannot sanctify a bond. These truths cannot be negotiated. They cannot be reinterpreted. They stand as law, written into the structure of being itself. Ignore them, and you inherit ruin. Honor them, and you preserve strength. This is the brutal conclusion. Her body counts do not only destroy men, they destroy civilizations. They strip intimacy of transcendence. They corrode families. They weaken nations. And unless men rise, unless they demand reverence, unless they refuse to profane, society itself will continue to descend into ruins. The choice is clear. The path is narrow. Evola's wisdom stands as a torch in the darkness. Will you walk with eyes open, or will you perish in illusion?